There are many reasons why a nation can fall. Criminals are slowly putting Kenya's tourism sector at risk. Every year, poachers are robbing the country billions of shillings. Illegal poaching is expensive and the number of wild animals being killed is alarming. With every bullet fired, a country's heritage is being destroyed. As the clock ticks, poisoned arrows are being used to empty game parks. On April 30th, 2016, President Uhuru Kenyatta set ablaze ivory worth $100 million. This was to demonstrate the country's stand on the war against illegal trade. United Nations data indicates that poachers cause about 60% of elephant deaths. This is fueled by the hunger of Asian countries for ivory. The jumbos are getting consumed in large numbers. Elephants are not the only species affected. Rhinos and lions are not spared either, as they are being hunted down day and night. Besides poaching, there are other challenges Kenya is facing. The government is trying to put things in order. Billions are spent, and at times, help is needed. One man believes that more can be done if modern technology can be adopted.
Moses Gishanga is primarily a software engineer who decided to turn towards hardware. So my primary role in my business is to try and solve social problems. So I identify problems, say persons with disabilities needing to navigate from one point to another, or forestry conservation, and I look for a solution. So that's what Moses Gishanga does.
Moses Gishanga, the founder of Autonomous System Research, wakes up every day with only one thing in mind: providing affordable solutions.
Solutions are there to problems, but they are quite expensive. There are solutions for persons with disabilities, for instance, which cost in excess of 140,000 shillings, which is well beyond the reach of many. So my question now becomes, how can we try and solve these problems locally using local solutions? That's what drives me. And so you find that the solutions end up being hardware solutions, the so-called open source hardware and open source software, which are things you can do right in your own home, right in your own backyard with very little knowledge. So that's what drives me to look for the solutions that I try to look for, and that's what drives my innovations.
At one point he was idle and he needed something to do. This is how the idea of making a drone was born.
So the drone idea came about in about 2010 when out of a difficult situation I was idle and I needed to do something, and I started flying kites. So I'd fly kites and I'd fly nylon-based aircraft, and it came to me that at that point in time, elephants were dying en masse, in large numbers. And so the question became, how can you use a small camera with a kite to take aerial photographs for wildlife conservation? And obviously it came to me that a kite wasn't the way to go, and eventually that's how I landed up on the drones. So the drone journey has been quite a long journey, but fortunately quite a lot of tech is out there available, open source solutions. But then of course you have to gear them or engineer them towards solving a certain solution so that they solve our particular need.
Drones, which are also known as unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, can be used in a number of ways. Some of the challenges facing various sectors in the 21st century can be dealt with cost-effectively using drones.
Security is one very vital role that the drone can solve or can be applied in. For instance, we have aerial surveillance for border patrol or for anti-cattle rustling or for counter-terrorism. So if you have aerial systems that are more affordable, I don't like to use the word cheap because it connotes inferior quality. Let's use the word affordable. If you have an affordable aerial platform that can take the place of a helicopter, for instance, then you can be able to monitor perhaps terrorist threats, areas of interest like the forest where there's always people hiding in there. You can use aerial surveillance. So not just any particular aerial surveillance, but possibly infrared or thermal imaging, so that you can be able to identify threats more rapidly, and then you can be able to mitigate against them. And then, of course, by flying a platform that doesn't have a person on board, you take off the human factor of if it were a helicopter and it had a fault and it could crash, it could kill people. With a drone, there's nobody inside, so you lessen the effects of having issues of people dying.
Many people wonder whether they can benefit from the use of drones. Organizations and the common man can utilize this technology.
The proverbial mama mboga, who is the common mwananchi, can benefit from drone technology in a number of ways. One way, of course, is agriculture, which is the primary thing that we do in Kenya for cash. So one way is to fly around and figure out how is your maize doing, how are your potatoes doing. And the only way you can do that is, of course, to use an aerial platform, which is the drone. You could use helicopters and other small aircraft, but the cost is high. But using drones directly in agriculture will boost productivity, which will going to increase our chances of having what we like to call sustainable food production. That's just one way. Another way is, of course, tourism. Because if you have an aerial platform that is able to conserve your wildlife, conserve your forestry reserves, then of course this directly affects us because it improves the amount of money that we get into our country. So the question now becomes, does Mama Mboga do the flying? Yes and no. Mama Mboga could do the flying herself, but we could also have organizations that are particularly targeted towards solving challenges in agriculture, like the Kenya Agricultural Research and Livestock Organization, KALRO, flying on behalf of us all, or KEFRI, the Kenya Forestry Service, Forestry Research. Forgive me if I say it wrongly, but they would be ideally the people to do that. KWS for wildlife, etc. So yes, this platform can be used for good, for various roles, and the goodness of these solutions affect Mama Mboga. You can use it to do mineral detection, for instance. Figure out where is the likelihood of there being petroleum, for example, or diamonds. And there are sensors that you can put on board, and then they'll be able to tell you where the likelihood of those minerals occurring are. Power, electricity, where you do grid, you monitor grid lines, like the power lines that bring electricity to our places. Because these are critical areas that sometimes require helicopters because they are vast expanses. If you can imagine a power line coming all the way from the Takwel Gorge all the way to Nairobi, that expansive distance cannot be covered by other means other than aerial means. So yeah, drones can be applied in very many places. Of course, in the film industry, people are using them to make movies.
The innovator understands that many people believe that unmanned aerial vehicles are very complicated. This is something he says is false.
Actually, the word drone, in my opinion, is usually very scary because you find a lot of people, when they say drone, they think about military applications. But there are certain other terms that other people like to use, like remotely piloted aerial systems. Personally, I like the word optionally piloted aerial systems to suggest that these systems need not necessarily have a pilot in them, meaning anybody can operate it, including Mama Mboga, without any particular skill, because the system doesn't need a pilot.
Kenya is yet to fully allow the use of drones within its borders. UAVs are being used in various countries in the world, and some of them are in Africa.
Rwanda currently are using drones for delivery of medical packages. We have Malawi doing aerial flights for agricultural production, and also other few countries which I may not rightfully have off of my mind, but there are several African countries which are using them for a number of things, including even Uganda for agricultural productivity. So there are quite a number of African countries that have wholly embraced the use of drones for good.
The use of drones seems to be a solution to many challenges facing mankind. But one question needs answers. Why is the country not using them or allowing its citizens to utilize them?
You can appreciate that if I was to hover something that is heavy above your head and it so happened to develop a fault, then you could be hurt. So one of the concerns the government has had was, even if they were to grant you a license, who is liable? Who ultimately bears the price of me operating a drone incorrectly and hurting you? That's one issue. And actually it is an issue that is so big that you can imagine in a place where, in a wedding for instance, where some people have used this technology to take aerial photographs. Supposing this thing falls out of the sky. So responsible aerial use of drones is the challenge.
Journalists can also use this technology rather than endangering their lives in pursuit of stories. Drone journalism can be used during floods or in dangerous zones. Insecurity and terrorism are making it difficult for these innovators and those who would like to use drones. But government restrictions on non-military use of drones are a hindrance to the good guys in a big way. Terrorists and criminals are no respecters of the law, meaning they won't refrain from using this technology to their advantage.
One of the large scares has been terrorists using this technology. But I always equate a drone to a gun, not in the veracity of how serious it is, but in terms of a terrorist could have a gun, but so does a law enforcement officer, a police officer. A police officer also needs a gun to effect their law enforcement. So we can't again come and say nobody should have a gun, including the police, because then that becomes self-defeating.
He can make a drone, he can fly one, but he can't sell locally. Despite years of research, he's yet to make money, and for now, all he can do is wait. Anyone who wants to fly a drone has to get permission from the Ministry of Defense and the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority.
My main personal challenge has been, of course, access to markets, because without the law, then I cannot be able to pass off my technology to anybody, because anybody who would want to consume this technology requires licensing. But as we stand, there's no framework under which anybody can acquire said licensing. So that's one challenge. Another challenge, of course, is what I've done is purely experimental. And when you're doing research and development, it requires vast amount of resources in terms of financial constraints, time, and even access to other fellow engineers so that you can be able to collaborate and jointly work.
He has made a product that can be used by school-going children, but the law is still a limitation. Civilians can only fly drones at a height of not more than 400 feet. Those who disobey the rules can be jailed for a term of not more than 3 months or attract a minimum fine of $500,000.
I'm in the process where I'm coming up even with a brand for toys. So we'll be making toys because we believe, why should we buy toys outside the country? And we are going to try and make them as affordable as is humanly possible. The reason we've not released our toys as of yet is because we are waiting on the law to be passed. Because the law on the drones actually affects our toys. How the law has been structured is that if you want to fly a toy, you'll be able to join a club and then you can fly. And once this law is passed, it will be so awesome, because you can imagine all the primary school kids, all the secondary school kids flying in their school clubs. You can imagine how awesome that is and how all-inspiring that is. But they're not going to be inspired if they have to buy a toy for 50,000 shillings, because they can't afford. 50,000 shillings is probably the cost of probably 5 years worth of tuition or school fees for that little child in primary.
Gishanga is not blaming the government for the challenges he is facing. He has benefited from its generosity.
The government has been very receptive, I must say, because I'm a recipient of a government grant to actually explore some of these technologies. So I can say that the government has been extremely receptive in terms of how innovations can be applied towards solving social problems. Particularly if I talk about the drone, right now there's the drone law that is coming up. I've seen the draft law. It's out there, it's available on their website, the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority website. It's one of the best laws, in my opinion, that I've seen. A lot of people, of course, have constraints, have reservations about certain clauses, but they are trying to make it all inclusive for everybody.
For innovators, government is not an enemy. They shouldn't fear seeking for assistance to see their dreams come true.
There's one organization that I have to always credit, the National Commission for Science, Technology and Innovation. Is a government body mandated to advise government on all matters of science and technology. In fact, they have grants through which they give to innovators. So actually back to the previous question of how somebody can, who is just in the village having the idea how they can do it, can try and get in touch with them. So they advertise for grants and they give grants and people are able to apply for them and gain, once you gain the grant, you get some money which you're able now to explore various, your idea until you get to a point where you can be able to commercialize that idea.
Israel, United States of America, and China are among countries making and selling drones. Once the law allows their use in Kenya, these countries will be competing for a share of the new market.
You have to appreciate that you can get this technology in very many places. So now the question becomes, what is your market differentiator? Because if I know I can buy, for instance, a DJI drone from China, why wouldn't somebody go and buy that one from there as opposed to come and buy it from me? So now the differentiator becomes the niche, the market, that particular thing that you hold over others, which may be a little additional knowledge over sensors, for example, over how you can extend the range, over how you can ensure that you get an endurance of a platform that can fly for hours on end without failure. So that's the differentiator.
Being a man whose world is about providing solutions, he's coming up with other products. He's using the knowledge he has gained making drones to help the visually impaired.
I've also devised a guidance device for the visually impaired, which is essentially a device to guide a person who's blind from a point A to point B. So you speak to it and say, take me to the market, for instance, or take me to the library, and it will figure out where the library is and take you. So that's direct borrowing of the drone technology to a device that is able to guide a person who is visually impaired. I've also devised other systems where I've been trying to come up with an electric car. That was inspired by Tesla. You know, the Tesla brand in America, how large that is. And in my opinion, nowhere else do we require electric cars than in Africa, where there's vast expanses of sunshine, where we could use sunshine as a source of electricity.
There are hundreds of people with commercially viable ideas, but they don't know where to begin. An American writer by the name Peter McWilliams said, "Do what you love, and the necessary resources will follow."
Now, it sounds ridiculous because if you have no money, somebody tells you do it, then you're like, is this person trying to make fun of me? But I'll give an example of my own experience. I didn't have anything when I started, absolutely nothing, but I did it. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. All you have to do is take the first step. As the Chinese say, even a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a basic footstep. You have to get the idea out of your brain somewhere for us to see.